Is 6v6 the solution to Overwatch 2's balance problems? This is a discussion that has been running around the community for the past few weeks or so. There's been a group of podcast about it. Samito just did a phenomenal video. If you guys haven't seen it, I'll show it to you on the screen now. Check it out on his channel by just going on to Samito. You can search Samito and you'll easily come out Samito Overwatch, and then you can check out his videos. Watch this video where he talked about 6v6 and everything. I've been talking about similar ideas, concepts, and philosophies throughout the videos that I've done in the past month. And we need to now finally have this discussion. Is that 5v5 problem solvable by 6v6? Is 6v6 the solution, or is 5v5 the right way to go? And I kind of want to open up some perspectives as well before we come down to a conclusion. I know my conclusion, right? It's kind of a bit of a 50-50, because my answer is yes and no. Because in my personal opinion, the problem isn't in the format. Going back into the previous format would be fine, but the problem isn't the format. That's the way I see it, right? I'm going to throw my perspective out there right away. The problem isn't the format, it's the balance team. And I said this in my video that popped off, that Overwatch 2 has a support problem and it's ruining the game, where I in depth for 30 minutes explained, and this is not even a hot take, this is the reality of the situation. And if you find offense in it, then please don't, because it's a video game at the end of the day, and we need to understand something about the roles and the characters. We need to have an unbiased approach. And before I go on and share that extreme hot take that I had, or not even a hot take at this point, is the fact that I am GM on all three roles, right? I'm not speaking out of my ass. I'm trying to have an unbiased approach to all three roles. Tank is miserable right now. DPS is just boring, and supports are having it all. The evidence is right there, because supports have the highest queue times. Games are taking longer if you play support. Just this morning in quick play, I was trying to get in some quick play games, and it took me 15 minutes to find a quick play game. That's crazy. And that happened for 4 times in a row. And then the queue times when I went onto tank and DPS was like 3 minutes, 2 minutes maximum, right? So from even that information, we know that supports have it good. Even by player instinct, people are flocking towards support as the role. It certainly helps that they got the most new heroes. It certainly helps that they got the big buffs. It certainly helps that they got all these game-changing tools and ultimates, and it's crazy, right? So my controversial take on all of this is that support has been the most babied role in Overwatch, where Blizzard, it doesn't matter whether it's been Alec Dawson's Overwatch 2 balance team or Jeff Goodman's Overwatch 1 balance team. The one thing that both of them have had in common, and I still don't understand why, is that both of them feel the need that support players have to cut corners, right? Now, before I talk about why this is a thing, one of the things we need to understand, I've studied psychology, sociology as a subject and things like that, is the player fantasy that like there's a certain type of group of people that you attract into each role, right? The support players tend to be the, like when you're playing support, you know that you want to be the one that gives care to the team, enables the team, looks out for the team, helps them out one way or the other. That might be different to what's expected in a first person shooter, and that's completely fine, right? The problem is when this role starts to go away from this logic and gets out of control. Now, to my original point that support is the most babied role, after Ana came out, I was saying this on streams, I was saying this in my first ever balance patch discussion video. I was saying this all the way back in season 1 when Genji got nerfed, right? I was talking about that it wasn't Genji's fault because of whatever reasons might be and things like that. My point basically was the support role is babied because Overwatch's balance team, doesn't matter the old one or the new one, they don't have faith in support players. They don't have faith in support players because unfortunately support players are the they're the loudest on social media. They're the loudest on the forums, and when all you hear from your community, this massive community that is, the one that you see more often than not, are saying things like, well, this is broken, that is broken, I can't do anything, etc., etc., you start to think that, okay, maybe this is true. Maybe if the majority of people are telling us that this is not fun, it may be true. And to a certain extent, it was true in season 1. The supports were a little bit underkitted. An argument could be made was that they just needed to change some things up for supports, slow down some DPS and tanks, and everything would be fine. Which is, which they did do in the following seasons, and then they got a bit too excited about it, and then they went crazy, and then the new heroes, and the list goes on. If you want to hear my full support breakdown, there's a video on my channel called Why Support, is the most broken role, and all that type of stuff. So go watch that if you want to hear my thought over there. I want to try and keep this video to the topic about 5v5 and 6v6. But Again, circling around a little bit, I know I'm kind of all over the place. Circling back to that point, the main point about 5v5 and 6v6, it doesn't matter which format we're in. Supports were broken in 6v6 and 5v5. If we want to save either format, the point is that support players are going to have to understand that this role cannot do everything. There needs to be a trade-off. In my videos, throughout all my videos in this past week, I've spoken about three particular supports who I don't think break the game design, and those are Mercy, Lucio, and Zen. Is that for everything they do, there's a trade-off, right? Even Ana, I'm not going to talk about Ana's nade. Ana as well could only really do one thing at a time. It's like if I shoot somebody that's my teammate, I heal them. If I shoot the enemy, I'm damaging them, right? I'm damaging them, excuse me. And then Sleep Dart is also a single target focus ability. And then the nade is where the AoE comes in. But the thing is that nade's problem is the anti-nade and how it can shut down healings, and it makes tank's life a living hell. And that's where that problem comes in. But in my opinion, that problem is solvable just by shifting it up into making it a healing reduction ability and not an overall shutdown, so that tank just gets deleted if they just, slightly sneeze in the wrong direction, right? So Ana was still fine. Like, yeah, she brought in the support creep with her nade that increased healing by 100%. They toned it down to 50%. And then around that time, Moth Meta happened because they buffed Mercy to kind of match her. And, from there on, they were getting silly. And then they toned Mercy down. And then we got the Brigida. We got Baptiste. Things started to get worse and worse and worse because it's, instead of allowing support players to rely on their skill expression to carry their games, to change the tide of the games and things like that, they started to introduce these characters with Bap and Brig, where most of them are just kind of, the characters are designed in this way where it's like, I will do the job for you. If in Baptiste's case, it's his abilities, right? I'm not going to talk about Bap's left and right clicks. Those are fairly fine, right? Those are somewhat fine. That's a topic for another day. But his left click, there's a clip where somebody actually, when they do the left click, the shift healing, the burst healing that he does with the shift, right? There's a clip where a Baptiste player in 3 team fights in a row gets 20% ult charge just by doing that. That's crazy, right? He's not even directly interacting with the players. He just pressed a button and then boom, it did it for him. Like, oh, here's like 40% ult charge out of nowhere. He has Immortality Field, which, while it's somewhat like you can deal with it nowadays, it's still frustrating to play because Overwatch is a game about seconds, and that 1-2 seconds that Immortality Field comes up, it can be a game changer when it comes to interacting with breakpoints. So this concept goes further because Kiriko with her Suzu brings an invulnerability, right, which messes a lot of tank engagement. Again, tank is the one that suffers from this the most. You then look at Lifeweaver's pull and how it can basically turn the tide on a tank versus tank battle, because again, invulnerability allowing the tank to reset. If they were out of position, it resets that situation. The other tank that's on the receiving end of it must now respond in whatever way that they can, but more often than not, when Lifeweaver uses a pull, it's a soft reset button for your tank. That tank cannot get punished, and you can extend that team fight out. And if you're like playing King of the Hill, it's going to draw out that fight, and it's going to be in your favor because again, Lifeweaver found value from that, and by that point you should have Tree of Life because it charges hella fast. And then Tree of Life, come on, it's so, you can use Tree of Life in so many different ways, but it turns your entire team comp into everybody's a mini tank, and the tank is now a giga tank. And that's crazy when you think about it. Like, he just creates goats again. Like, it's like a budget rally ult, but in some of the situations I would say it's actually better than rally because of the way the tree can work, and like the tree is healing, Bap is healing, Petal is there. Players are starting to understand how to use Petal platform, and it can bring a lot of good value in certain situations. Like, even just this horrible game design of a character has to build their ultimate. Let's say you're playing Zarya and you use your ultimate, you catch 5 people, you're like, okay, this is it, this is my moment. I get my moment, I'm going to turn the team fight around. They don't have any ultimates to counter me, they didn't ult track me that well, they didn't deflect my ult or anything like that, they didn't interact with me in a smart way. And then out of nowhere, you do Kiriko Suzu, you do Immortality Field, you might do a Petal platform on the floor, and you lift everybody outside of the Graviton Surge. And this is where the frustration begins to come in for tank players, because they're just sitting there like, well, then what's the point of me playing the game? If this character will just press one button and ruin everything that I try to do, what's the point? Now, on the other side of things, support players, I will speak on your behalf as well. Support players' original argument was that they didn't have the tools to actually fight back. The key thing that I want to talk about was support players isolated the problem to we can't fight back. Now, there's a lot of arguments where people said that actually it wasn't the case that you couldn't fight back. Support players had to learn how to play a little bit more, like they had to become a lot more active. Now, what does that mean that they had to become a lot more active? It basically means that support players couldn't just, well, in the lower elos and things like that, the higher elo players didn't have a problem with this. Lower elo players need to understand how to position better, how to take corners, how to utilize natural cover, and not rely on double barriers because it made them feel safe that they can just do whatever they want, walk wherever they want, right? So we actually had to force a group of players in the role of support to start getting better at the game by understanding it, because DPS and tanks were fine with this because their role already demands them to be good at using corners and natural cover and things like that when you're in the team fights, right? So as support players started to catch on, they also started to learn how much more impactful their role has become. And this has led us into the current situation now that we understand how impactful the support role is and how it interacts against tanks especially, right? The DPS role is cosmetic. It does not exist. It is so quiet these days because they've done a good job at balancing pretty much most of the DPS, and Torb and Bastion are about to get the chopping knife too. They're going to be made clunky and weird again. But the problem is that it doesn't matter how you want to approach the balance towards tank and DPS. The inherent problem is actually in support. And whether you go back to 6v6 or you stay in 5v5, the massive drawback with 5v5 is you have to accept that rock, paper, scissors will be more extreme. Now, some people might like that, some people might not like that. Those same problems were there in 6v6 too. For example, if the enemy was playing Rein Zarya and your team was playing Roadhog D.Va, you know that that was basically a free loss for you, right? But you could make an argument that the frequency of that was less compared to you getting a Doomfist OTP who's legit just hard diving into the enemy backline when Orisa, Sombra, Ana, May, all his hard counters are present in the lobby and he's refusing to swap. So you can't make up for that player. So regardless of the format, the way I see it is I don't care what format we're in. Do I think 6v6 can solve most of this game's problems? Yes. At a certain point, I am a fan of 5v5. I think 5v5 brings a lot more goods than bads to the game, but the problem with the bads that 5v5 brings is that they're so heavy that you just, like, you realize that all these heroes really were designed for 6v6. But the problem is that the newer heroes are designed with 5v5 in mind, which is fine. However, I think it's still not too late to go back into 6v6, adjust a lot of, like, I don't even think you need to make that much crazy adjustments. Tanks will just need a revisit of their HP pools and things like that. You could revert some of them to their Overwatch 1 states. To some of the tanks that did get good reworks, let's say a character like maybe Doomfist, Orisa, you keep them in their current format and see how that goes in a 6v6 situation. We can legitimately use the experimental card. The experimental card has been there for 1 year and we've never used it. It is finally time to use experimental card, try out this new balance philosophy approach and see how things feel. Make it so that people have to play like 15 games in experimental card, force them to play the experimental card and tell them if they do that, they can get 1000 credits, the golden credits that you can use to buy shop skins and things like that, right? So you basically guarantee people to get a free battle pass if they want to use it for that purpose, or a shop, or save it up for shop skins and things like that. The reason you give players an incentive, first of all, you can, number one, win goodwill. Number two, players will be satisfied. And most importantly, you have a bigger pool of players playing that experimental card on a consistent basis to gather data and player feedback to see if this would be the right solution or not. Nobody is saying that you have to go to 6v6 right away, but you could at least experiment in 6v6. However, if we go to 6v6 or we stay on 5v5, if support as a role is not addressed, it does not matter where we go. Support was just as strong in Overwatch 1 and it's just as strong in Overwatch 2, if not more, to compensate for the lack of one tank. But in my personal opinion, it doesn't need to be that strong. Instead, let that pressure be on your DPS to make up for the off tank being gone. One DPS can start playing closer to support. So we try to, as a community, develop this mindset, like how, as a community in the past year, we've developed this mindset for support players to DPS more. And they have been. Lots of more support players have been like they're just so good at it. If you look at Iliari, if you look at people playing Ana and Bap, Zenyatta, even these days, like they're actually really good now. Even in Plat and Diamond, players have gotten really good at just the shooty part of the game. So, and they're finding a lot of value, and more people are trying to do that on support, because at the moment support does the shooty part better. At least the majority of them have better dual potential and better poke pressure than some of the DPS right now, because DPS just feels so one dimensional that, okay, I exist. If I get enabled, if I get resources, I can do stuff, I can turn the game around. If I don't, then I'm just kind of existing and hoping for the best, that when I do get to make a play with my ultimate or some big flank, it doesn't get negated right away by one button press from Kiriko or Ilya, or I didn't find Ilyari's pylon and it just kept everybody alive, and the list can go on, right? So my concluding thoughts on this situation is, do I think 6v6 the solution? I do think it could potentially be a better solution, simply because myself personally, I am getting tired of the rock paper scissors. However, going to 6v6 for the past 6 years, 5 years in Overwatch 1, the tank role was the least played. Even in the good metas that we had, tank was still not played that much. And you could argue that that's because they didn't, we weren't getting new heroes and things like that. And maybe it was also because, we weren't free to play. So the player expands, like, the player pool wasn't as big. So maybe now if we try again, things could go better, right? So again, like I said, the experimental could be a great way to gather player feedback, player data, and, at the end of the day, come to a conclusion. Okay, how are people feeling about 6v6? How are people feeling about 5v5? And then according to player reception, you go with the format that gets the votes. You can even maybe have a voting, thing that, well, what would you guys prefer? And then if you go back into 6v6 and things don't work out, again, you can always come back to 5v5. And yes, it looks weird for a game to constantly keep doing that. It doesn't look good. However, at the moment, the balance is all over the place. We already know that the next balance patch is going to have the patch focused towards DPS and tank. But again, Blizzard, for how long are you going to rotate against damage and tank when they don't need to be adjusted any further? We need to adjust support as a role, and then look at the impact towards the game, and then look at player sentiment, and then come to a conclusion of, okay, well, this or that might need to be tuned down. For the love of God, characters like Tracer and Genji are barely viable anymore, and they are some of the highest skill ceiling heroes. Characters like Doomfist and Ball, these are again high skill ceiling heroes that have just become next to useless because of how easy it is for other characters to outplay them. And the final thing that Blizzard needs to understand is not every hero needs to be at a near 50% win rate or high pick rate, because more often than not, people will want to play certain characters that are more popular than others. Jeff Kaplan once revealed that Genji and Mercy are the most popular characters in the game, and after them, there's a big drop, and then there's the other characters. I believe he said it was Diva, Widowmaker, Tracer, etc., Cassidy. The list goes down from there, right? But the point is that you will always see people playing these characters that are more popular simply because they vibe with them, they grew up with them, or they just really love the character. That doesn't mean that the character is OP or the character is good or bad. It just means people love that character. Reinhardt is another one. Reinhardt has been a fan favorite for the longest time, and both balance teams, whether Overwatch 1 or Overwatch 2, have treated him incredibly poorly. Players have always said that Ryan has been a character that's fun to play with or against simply because Ryan is a fair character. We like fair characters. We don't like characters that can do everything, negate everything, do high damage, high burst heals, immortality, avoidability, etc., etc., etc. This is not good for the game. At the end of the day, at its core, Overwatch is a first-person shooter. And the more you strip from tank and DPS this agency to make plays, the more you will lead into player frustration, and it doesn't matter what format you're in. You will end up with comps like Double Shield, which is again all about stripping player agency so that nobody dies in team fights, or you end up in a 5v5 scenario where you end up in the metas like we have gotten now, Orisa and Zarya, that just cannot die because the amount of healing is gone out of control, the amount of invulnerability has gotten out of control. Especially when you stack them together and when they rotate their cooldowns, it is really, really hard to justify 5v5. So in my opinion, I think 6v6 is a solution, but I don't mind 5v5. All I want to see from the balance team is balance out support. I want to see what 5v5 and even 6v6 could look like in a balanced situation where support The newer supports, not some of the older supports, as Samito likes to say, the DLC supports, if they could have a drop off somewhere, because look at Zenyatta, he has a drop off. He doesn't have mobility, right? But he's a glass cannon support. Lucio, he's like the jack of all trades, master of none, except of allowing for rush comps and things like that. Mercy is also one-dimensional in that she can only do one thing at a time. Ana, again, ignoring the nade problems, Ana was also that type of support character that could do one thing at a time. And these are all fan favorite characters. But then you have the newer supports, and they're just like more buffed up versions. I always see Kiriko as a more overpowered Mercy. Like, what would an overpowered Mercy look like? Okay, well, let's take Guardian Angel and make it go through walls. Let's take her ability to res, but instead of resing, she can just negate the death on the spot. So there's no like the thing about res is that Mercy is vulnerable, and you can, if you camp the body, if you dive the Mercy when she's resing, you can deny that. You can't do that to Kiriko when she brings her Suzu up. And Suzu is a cleanse. One of the things we always wanted in Overwatch 1 was a cleanse. We never said we wanted a cleanse and a burst healing and this and that, etc., etc. So it's just a balanced philosophy. It's a game design problem. If they can figure this out, this game can be saved and it can go back to a game of the year status that it won in 2016. It is still doable. But if they don't make these drastic changes to support and try to approach the support community and make them understand that, hey, we're going to be doing some things to the support as a role because it is a little bit out of control and it is taking agency away from DPS and tank, and we want to bring all three roles on a near same level while maintaining identities for each role. Damage should be about damage, support should be about enabling and supporting the team in front of you, and tank should be about tanking, taking space, denying space, and most importantly, being the forefront of making engagements. Also, they should be allowed to get kills. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they should be the forefront of your engagements. They can set up your kills. They can be that raid boss, even in a 5v5 setting or in a 6v6 setting. They can be tuned down a little bit to work together, bring that tank synergy back, and go from there. That's my honest opinion on it. What do you think? Is 6v6 the solution? Is 5v5 solvable from a balance perspective? Or do you think the problem doesn't matter which format we're in, unless support is addressed, we won't be going anywhere? With that being said, that's it for today's video. For more thoughtful discussion topics about Overwatch 2, feel free to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. It's a free way to support my channel and helps me grow, and I would really appreciate that. I'm not asking for anything else. With that being said, I will see you in the next video.